Welcome to Downpour.com's interview series. I'm Malcolm Hillgartner, and today it's my pleasure to be speaking with Michael Gruber. Blackstone Audio published the audio format of Michael Gruber's latest novel, The Return, narrated by Jonathan Davis, simultaneously with the hardcover on September 3, 2013. Welcome, Michael. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Congratulations on the release of The Return. Tell us a little bit about the main character, Richard Marder, and how he came about.
The plot is lifted from a book that I was reading at a time when I really needed to have a book. I'd written a book that didn't work. I was behind on my contract, and I was reading Carlos Fuentes' The Old Gringo. And I said, this is a terrific story, and I think I'll use it. And this is something that happens all the time. There aren't very many plots, but the idea of an American who fears the burden of death. He's got a bad diagnosis, and it's indeterminate. It could happen any time. And rather than go through the usual American way of death, the hospitals and the mourning relatives and the rest of it, he decides that he's going to finish his life in Mexico, where he went 30 years earlier, and where he met his wife. This is a guy who essentially considers himself, at least spiritually, a Mexican, even though he's a native-born American. That's the basic driver of the plot. And we don't know at the beginning of the plot what is the unfinished business that Marder has in Mexico. But we have this idea that here's a guy who's going to go down by himself and finish his life in some way that is connected with the violence, the narco violence in Mexico. Just as in the original, The Old Gringo, it's a man modeled on the writer Ambrose Bierce, who goes down to Mexico and participates in the Mexican Revolution. It's a man who is essentially given up his life, and as a result has no fear. He's accepted his own death. And so he goes down there thinking that he's going to be on his own, and it turns out he's not on his own. He pulls with him the great currents of his life. One is his friendship with this really awful guy who he met in Vietnam during the war. This guy named Skelly, who is a character of obscure background and great violence. And also his daughter, who is concerned about him and who has the skills and the drive to go find him. And so that's the situation of the novel. And the novel works out from those givens.
This story is huge in terms of its themes, not just in terms of being a thriller, but the personal ones as well, which I think is what makes your writing so special. Once you came up with this idea, obviously the setting with the narco violence in Mexico, how did you research that? Did you go down to Mexico and go undercover?
I was just struck by the news stories that I read about this La Familia Michoacana, a fearsome drug gang.
Listen to the full interview at Downpour.com.